I'm talking to Brother T.B. Randolph, who was pastor at Fort Kettle Baptist Church on 2 occasions. He came first in 1937, pastored from 1940, came again in 1944, pastored from 1947. Brother Randolph, how did you happen to come to be pastor at Fort Kettle Baptist Church?
Well, after 5.5 years at Pastor Linden, I was led to resign there, and we had a young woman in our church at Linden who taught in high school. She was our training union director. She was born and raised here in Marshall and was a widow, and her husband was the first pastor of Fort Kettle Baptist Church. And she was a good friend of the Bunnells. Brother Bunnell was a member of the pulpit committee, and she talked to him and to others down here about me, and they invited me to come down and preach at Buell Call. So in June 1937, I came and preached one Sunday, and they called me. I moved on the 15th of June on my birthday, 1937, and became pastor. I found that the situation was entirely different to what I had been accustomed, and it was difficult to me to get adjusted to the situation. I found that the people, the membership of the church, had not been accustomed to having the pastor visit. And therefore, they seemed for a long time to resent even my visiting and coming in their homes. That they were just not accustomed to it. And they didn't use any modern methods at Sunday school work and about reaching the unreached. And I began and preached, and we emphasized Sunday school, and I taught Sunday school training courses, training union study courses, both through all the years, and we enlarged our organization, and the Lord blessed us, and people came, and we never had any great outpouring of the Holy Spirit. In other words, a real big revival, but most of the people that we reached and who were saved and baptized were saved in the regular church services. And so we, at that time, of course, had no baptistry. We baptized in the Harris Lake. I baptized in the Second Baptist Church and First Baptist Church. And our building was inadequate. We just had 2 Sunday school rooms. I taught the senior adults, both men and women, in the auditorium, and another class or 2 meeting in the auditorium. Dee Mulligan taught the young people in the little upstairs Sunday school room, and the women taught the little fellows downstairs there. But I had brought with me a mimeograph machine that I bought while I was pastor at Linden. I was accustomed to making out a church bulletin. I was the first pastor at Linden who ever had a church bulletin. And I did it at my own expense. And I did likewise here. And so every week I got out a weekly bulletin. And there's a bulletin every Sunday. And in that I tried to help educate and get the people concerned about reaching the unenlisted. But the Lord blessed us in many ways, but the salary was small. The church paid me $75 a month. We lived in the old parsonage over there. We had no running water. We drew water out of the well on the back porch. we had no inside toilet facilities. We had a garage out there where we kept the car, and there was an outside toilet. Back behind that, the entire church, and the church pastor's family used. That's all they wanted. And we kept going. And I had to pay my own light bill. We had gas. I had to pay my own gas bill. And my own telephone bill. The church didn't pay anything. Paid me $75 a month. Well, my daughter Frances was in high school, and it was costing more to keep her in high school here than it did in Linden. But back in the years when I was in college and trying to get an education, I worked in a dry goods store, 2 dry goods stores in Greenville, Texas, where I was in school, and I was accustomed to selling merchandise. So I talked to the deacons about it that fall and asked them if it would be all right with the church for me to work some that fall and winter in the dry goods store. And they said readily yes, be all right, nobody will object to it. So I went to work at J.C. Penney Company on the Saturday, and I worked for them all that fall. And it led to the fact that I worked for that company 17 years in all, and I retired from the company in 1960. The company retired me when I was 60 years of age.
How many deacons did you have?
We had
37.
We had Brother Bedell, D. Mulligan, Brother Clark, Brother Cruder as deacons. And we went on with just those deacons for about 2 years, and the church elected 3 other men that we ordained: Lonzo Davis, Herbert Boyd, Carmichael. The church ordained them, and they made good deacons and were loyal and faithful church and to me until their death. All 3 of them have died, and I preached the funeral for 2 of them. And so, the other deacons who died, Brother Reeves, I preached his funeral, Brother Bedell's and Brother Cruder's. I preached their funerals when they died. Well, I got discouraged in 1940, and I resigned, and I went back into part-time church work. I was pastor at Woodlawn, and half-time in 1941, and at New Colony out from Linden, 5 miles from Linden, until after the church had 2 pastors, and then in 43 they called me back. They got without a pastor there, the pastor resigned, and they called me back, and I came back as pastor, 2nd period.
Had there been any changes in the church in
Yeah.
that interim?
Yes, there had been some. There'd been some additions all along, and the financial program. There's one other thing that during those last years that I was pastor, we were so handicapped with a little small building, and the building was bad shape. And I did what I had done at Linden. During the last 2 or 3 years I was at Linden, at my suggestion, I took it up with the deacons and recommended, knowing we'd have to have the building there, that we take an offering every 4 months, and a special building fund offering. And we did that, and when the Linden Church built, they had a lot of money in the bank. they went into that building they have now. And so the same thing happened here. The deacons here readily agreed that we take that special offering every 4 months, and we set it aside, put it in the bank in a special building fund. That those monies were not used for anything else at all. So when the time came for the church to tear the old building down and rebuild, they had a good sum of money on hand to start their building program.
Did the church have a WMU and a brotherhood in those days?
No, the church, during the years that I was pastor there, didn't have a WMU. Our brother, now we tried to get a brotherhood organized time or two, but it all failed. And to my knowledge, every effort that's been made through all the years since I first came there, they've never had a brotherhood, a real organized brotherhood in the church. But the women did respond. When I was missionary in Fannin County, back in those years, we responded to the need of Butner Orphans Home every fall. The TP Railroad Company furnished us a boxcar. And when I was missionary those 2 years, the churches of the association brought in corn, potatoes, and canned goods of all kinds, hay. And at that time, Buckner Orphans Home had a farm. They farmed and had horses and mules. And so I loaded for 2 years boxcar loads of fruit, clothing, canned goods, hay and corn. And TP Railroad hauled it free of charge for us. Well, we did the same thing while I was at Linden for 2 years in succession. Brother Edgar Hamilton worked with me, and we loaded a car out of Atlanta one year. The TP hauled that free of charge, and our women contributed canned fruits, and our women there made quilts, and always had a large group of quilts to go to the orphans home. So likewise here at Fort Caddo, our women were faithful about that, and they made quilts every year. And we, as a church, for nearly every year, we shipped things like that to Buckner Orphans Home. The East Texas Motor Freight Company hauled that free charge for us. So the work went on until in 44, I resigned again. I went back and pastored other churches. And then later on, after the church building, Brother Shaw was pastor when this building, the original auditorium, was built. And it was after he left that they didn't have anybody, and they called me back as interim pastor. So I served several months as interim pastor of the church here. And I feel like that some of the best work I did was during those 3 years of interim work that I did until they got another pastor.
What about the music program?
Well, Brother Carmichael was a choir director through all the years, and who was Francis Reeves, Francis Tracy. No, that was before. Aaron Reeves' wife was pianist. She taught school up here in this school. She was a school teacher. And she and Aaron belonged to the church. And she played the piano. And Coy led the singing. And car. I was late for years and years.
Who was your Sunday school director? Do you remember who?
Well, I don't remember who the superintendent was when I came here. I guess Brother Bonnell was. I guess he was the superintendent. And later on, Alonzo Davis served as superintendent of Sunday school for several years.
Can you remember any really outstanding revivals that came? You said most of the evangelism was done just Sunday by Sunday.
No, we never had what I would call and what I've been accustomed to, and holding revivals in churches, having what we call a real revival. We had some good meetings, good services. People were saved, but all in all, most of the people that joined the church for baptism were saved in the regular service.
What would you say the greatest strength of Fort Caddo was in those days?
Greatest strength?
Yes, sir. How was it? What do you think the greatest?
Well, it was their love for the Lord and for each other, and their cooperation that made it possible, of course. I didn't ever give myself credit for doing any great work there.
But their love, just their love for God.
That's of course, that's all that kept me in the ministry all those years. But
if you had it to do over again, would you spend your life in ministry?
what was it?
If you had it to do all over again, would you spend your life in the ministry?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The biggest regret I have about it all after these 66 years in the ministry was that I put it off as long as I did. I was saved when I was 15 years old in July 1910. In less than 2 years, I felt like the Lord wanted me to preach. And I got married when I was young and hadn't finished high school, but I was working. Although deep down in my heart I felt like the Lord wanted me to preach, I was working in the church. I was elected to an office in the church in the fall after I was baptized in the summer. And from that day until this, I've had a job in the church. Never was without a job. I served as general secretary of our Sunday school for 5 years. And then I didn't accept that. I felt like I needed to teach. And so I went to teaching, and I taught for about 2 years, Sunday school class. And then the church elected me superintendent of the Sunday school. And I had that job until I moved away in 1990. And I bought and studied the first book that was ever put out by our Southern Baptist Sunday School Board on Sunday school. After I was elected superintendent, I ordered one of the books, the original books on Sunday school work, and I studied it, and I set in motion and made some changes. And by their cooperation in our home church, made some changes that were for the good and building up of the Sunday school and the church through the years. And I became, and my idea at that time was, well, my excuse to the Lord was, Lord, you get somebody else to preach. I want to be a Sunday school worker. I want to be a Bible teacher. And that was the way I tried to excuse myself. my pastor realized it, that what was happening in 1919, after some trying experiences. I didn't, let me go back and say this about the ministry. I believed in the ministry, and I wanted to preach. Deep down in my heart, I wanted to preach. But the thing that made me hesitate was my unworthiness and unpreparedness to be a preacher. I preached many a sermon between the plow handles as I plowed my crops. But my pastor took me off one day where we ate dinner at my uncle's, and we went down in the woods of the creek, bed of the creek, and he talked to me, and we got out on our knees in that sandbar on that creek bed, and it was there I made a final surrender. But that was to preach. But that was after that I'd had those trying experiences. I taught school 4 years, in country schools. I got a state teacher's certificate before I ever saw a college. I took some special courses in high school there at Picton, and I took a state teacher's examination and passed, and I went to teaching school, my first school, in January of 1914 in Weaver, Texas. And I taught that year, and the next year skipped one and then taught 2 more in another church southwest of school southwest of Picton. But I didn't get anywhere. I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't happy. And my brother and I, my older brother and I, on a Friday, were in the woods sawing stove wood, sawing off the blocks and splitting it. And I don't know whether you ever did that or not, like that splitting wood. But I made a mislick and cut that hand open in 2 there. You know, Paul said, I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. I tell him that's the marks there. I cut that bone in 2, and this leader, that little finger dropped down. We were off over there in the woods and the mud, just going everywhere. Brother was nervous and scared him to death, but they lived closest, and my wife and his wife were down at our mother's. We had rural telephones, and he said, well, what in the world are we going to do? And I said, well, I happen to have a stout handkerchief in my pocket. And I said, tie it around my arm, and I got my stick cord, and I said, let's go to the house and call the doctor. And we got to the house. I sat out on the edge of the porch, still bleeding everywhere. And he went in the house and called Dr. Taylor, and called down at my mother's and got our wives, and they came, the neighbors came. We had party lines, and everybody listened to each party line on the telephone. And so in a little while, this group family doctor came, and he cleaned that all out, sewed that leader back together. He said, now I can't give you anything to ease your pain, you're just going to have to bear it. Well, my cousin by marriage held my hand for the doctor this way, and I was gripping the bedpost, and my cousin fainted, almost fainted, and another man had to take his place. Well, he fixed it up and put a shingle under there and tied it all up. That was Friday afternoon. Saturday morning, my wife took appendicitis. She got sick, real sick. I'd take her to the doctor. Well, the doctor had to come out there, and he pronounced it appendicitis. And there we were. Closest hospital was Dallas. We had no cars, and that was 1919, and February of 1990. And I had no money. Baylor Hospital is the closest place. But the neighbors and friends made it possible financially. We got on the train. My sister had to go along with me to take care of me. I had this hand swinging around my neck. We were sad. And we got the train at midnight out of Picton, changed trains in Greenville and got into Dallas. And all this time, but in the meantime, on Sunday afternoon, she wasn't satisfied with Dr. Taylor's diagnosis. My uncle, Dr. Boyd Randolph, lived in Como where he practiced medicine. And she insisted I call him, and I called him, and he and Dr. Taylor met. And they both made a diagnosis, and both said the same thing, appendicitis. So they tried to give her medicine to ease her. But we made the trip on the train, got off the Union Station in Dallas, and by the time we got there, got off the Union Station, she was able to walk up all those steps of that Union Station. There are long steps of the old Union Station. We got on a streetcar and went to the hospital, and the appendix had burst, and that's what made it easy on her. But there was the doctor, there was an old doctor, good old Christian doctor out there. He said it was just as clean as could be. There wasn't a bit of infection, anything. But we stayed there. In those days, they had appendectomy. You had to stay in the hospital about 2 weeks. Well, I sat around that old Baylor Hospital, and I was sitting out there on the porch, side porch, one afternoon, wrestling with the Lord about preaching. And all of this had come, and I surrendered as I sat there, that settee out there on that old Baylor Hospital porch, and surrendered to preach right there. Made the final complete surrender. This and the trouble she had now. Well, we got back home, my hand got well, I didn't have any trouble, it healed up. I made a crop. But in 1918, in my farming, I lost 2 horses. 2 horses died on me that year. Made a crop failure, didn't make any money paying it, money on the little piece of land and house I had. And so all of it just defaulted right on. And
Hi, come in.
so, but after I made a crop in 1919, and I made the best crop I've ever made in my life that year, and harvested it all. But going back to the matter of preaching, my mother, when I told her at her home, she was on the bed, she was ill, I told her I surrendered to preaching. I thought she'd be surprised about it, but she just looked at me and smiled and said, "Boy, son, I've been expecting that all the time." Said, when you were born, I gave you to the Lord. I asked the Lord to make a preacher of it. So all of my six years in the ministry was resulted like that when I was born. My mother dedicated me to the Lord. So they've been wonderful years. I wouldn't take anything in the world for the experiences. And if I had it to go over again, I'd go into it with all the zeal and the zest and the power and the grace that God would give me to be a better preacher and a better pastor than I've ever been.
We sure appreciate you taking the time to talk on our tape there. It's going to be a good part of our church's system.